He pōkeke uinuku I tūwai, he tāpui tāmaka I tauwai, tū mai au parikāranga, karanga mai. Hoi no kei te mihi atu au, mātou, o Aotearoa ki au kūtou ki te ao. Tēnā kūtou katoa. Nau mai rā ki tēnei wāhi kōrero and welcome to Native Minds. This is a Māoriland project where we get to speak with Indigenous people around the world about matters that are of concern to us. And it's a pleasure to have the planet with us, and it's a pleasure to have our guests here this afternoon, this evening, and tonight. So the format of Native Minds is such that when we ask our guests to introduce themselves, we ask them to reply to 3 questions. Firstly, what is your name? Secondly, what tribe or nation do you identify with? And thirdly, what do you think your personal mission, kaupapa, raison d'être, happens to be? Why has your God put you on this planet? So those 3 questions, and we'll ask our guests today to explain that. And I'll turn first to our northernmost participant, and I'll just say for the moment, Ana Lajla. Over to you, Eho.
Pura baby, hui suhtas mun pääsen tiikun täivadita. Kia ora from Sámi. My name is in Sami we would say I would be Ristina Laure Nilstoma Anne Lajla on my father's side, and then I would be Inka Estera Mai-Britt Anne Lajla on my mother's side. So we always refer to our ancestors until my great-grandmother and great-grandfather. And yes, but Anne Lajla Utsi is my other name, and I am from the Sami people up north in Norway. I live in a small village on the middle of the tundra, above the Arctic Circle. It's really dark here now. The winter is coming and it's getting darker and colder every day, and we're just waiting for the snow anytime soon. And our people, we live in 4 countries, in Norway, Finland, Russia, and Sweden. So we are divided by 4 countries, but of course for us these borders does not exist. We are one people still, even though we are spread for the wind in that sense. And then my personal thing, I'm not so sure, or yes, I think I know what it is. When I was 14 years old, I saw the film Pathfinder, which was the first ever Sami feature film directed by Nils Scope. And I went to the cultural center here in Godegaino and with my cousin, and we put on our dresses, and we were 14 years old, and for the first time we saw ourselves on a big screen. We had never ever seen that before, and we heard our language and we saw our people, and yeah, I think that was a life-changing experience for me, and I think that's why I'm into film, why I believe so strongly in the impact of film, and I think this is my calling and why I'm so.
Tēnā koe Ana Lajla. And we'll turn next to our brother from Aotearoa, from New Zealand. Kai a koe te waihoa.
Tuatahi ake tainui tēnei ka mihi ake. Mau I whakakaukau mai a mātou ngā tōpito te ao, hei wāhi kōrero I tēnei ata ki ngā kei whakarongorongo te ao, no reira tēnei ka mihi. Ko ai tēnei, ko maunga kia te maunga, ko ai te mata te moana. Ko tupiriri te tangata ko Ngāti whātua te iwi, Ko jau Pihema tēnei mihi ake nei kia koutou. Good morning to everybody and good evening to everyone from wherever you might be watching our broadcast today. My name is Joe Pihema. I'm from Ngāti Whatua, and we are the people from pretty much the Auckland area, stretching right up toward Whangarei in the north on the eastern side, over toward Dargaville. And I'm here today to basically take part in this kōrero about the sacred thing called te reo. And that's been a big part of our family and our journey, and looking forward to sharing some of those aspects today in terms of a life mission, a phrase. I suppose I could take a small line out of a haka, one of our tribal haka, kia ue ue, kia tū tanga tanga I te riri. May I be prepared for all of the challenges that I face, and may I be prepared for all the opportunities that await to be opened. Because at the moment, I'm in a phase of developing my own capacity. Myself and my whānau, we're trying to rediscover that X factor, that spark, which was evident in our tupuna and our ancestors. So we're in this redevelopment, this capturing of that spark. Why? Because it makes me more of an efficient and effective sharer and teacher, and there's where we're also at. We're in that mode of helping to pass on this information, pass on this knowledge and mātauranga. So just want to say good morning, mōrena to everyone here today. Ngā mihi.
Tēnā koe, Joe, tēnā koe. And it's a pleasure to turn to our sister. Kia ora, Zoe.
Kia ora. Sego sewa gwego wagatanune jiga iges karakwahali ne waksenod on ne ganyageha dahnu Zoe Hopkins miliungats ne oturu ne geha oswego tskirero dahnu wagyote ne ungwana ori wage dahnu ne te yoyaks ori wage de jaro yori humano ni agueriani. Hi everyone, my name is Garakuhawi in Mohawk. It means she carries the sun. And in English, my name is Zoe Hopkins. I said I'm very happy to be here to speak on something I'm very passionate about, which is my language. And I work in my language and I work in film, and both of those are very important to my heart. I'm talking to you from Oshuigan, which is part of Six Nations in our territory, the Grand River Territory, over here in Canada. So thanks for having me. I miss you guys so much.
Kia ora, Zoe. It's so lovely to see you. Hoi no tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Tainui Stephens. My people are of the Te Rarawa, which is the top end of New Zealand. And we're here today, and it's just, I just want to say how wonderful it is. Tangen te ngākau te hakarongo aka ki e nei reo. It's so beautiful to hear these languages that spring from the lands of our planet. Thank you for joining us. Because we're going to talk about language, and for me, one of the things that I'm very, very aware of as a parent, I recall with my daughter that one of the things I really wanted to do by way of passing on the language was to pass on the vibrations of the language. And so for me, a lullaby or singing her to sleep was an important part of her life, or our life. And I've found that, as she got older, when she was upset or whatever, I'd sing her lullaby to her and everything went calm again. And it was kind of like just those vibrations at that early age, almost despite the words, seems to me to be important. And I just want to sort of say that by way of introduction to this discussion, we're not just talking about the value of our language, of our own tongues, of our own people, of our own tribes, but what we do to pass it on. We can lose a language in one generation, and it takes three generations at least to get it back. So by painting that as a framework, I'd like to ask Lajla to start off our discussions about what she and her people, what you and your family have been doing with regard to preserving your language. Kia ora, Lajla.
Yeah, so first of all, it's so nice to be here tonight. I'm really happy about that, and seeing my friends from Aotearoa and from all over. So yeah, I thought I wanted to start by telling about my mother's family, because she is from the coast of here up north in Norway. And in the coastal areas, the assimilation politics was really hard, and so many of our people lost our language, the Sami language. And my grandmother and grandfather, my mother's family, they were 8 children, and the 4 eldest of them learned Sami when they were growing up. And then within 1 year, there was a language change in language. So the 4 youngest learned Norwegian because of the assimilation, and and of these 8 children, we are 18 cousins. And my mother met my father, who was from Godegeitno, and Godegeitno is here the majority of the people speak Sami language. Over 90% of our inhabitants here in Godegeitno speak Sami, so it's in the inland. So the assimilation politics did not reach in the same way here. And that me and my father met, and that me and my brother and sister, we grew up here in Godegeitno. If we were one of the other cousins, I would not have been speaking Sami. So some of them have learned Sami like when they are adults. Some of my cousins have taken the language back, and even one of my mother's younger brother, who also grew up with Norwegian, they are now speaking Sami with their children, and the children are learning in kindergarten and in school, and in that way taking back the language. So and then in my own family, we have 3 children, and my husband, or Roger, he's also from the coast, from another area, but the coastal area in a small village called Mandal and Olmaivagi. And also there, the same thing happened with the language, that only the elder generation speak the language, and the young ones have lost it. So Roger also, his family, he didn't grow up speaking Sami. So in my family, our children, they speak Norwegian with Roger, but I speak Sami with my children, with them, and they speak Sami to each other. And then I speak Sami to Roger, and he speaks Norwegian to me, because I don't want to speak Norwegian to him. So it's it's interesting. And then also when I was when Laura, my oldest, when he was starting school, I was living in Oslo with him in the south. It's the capital of Norway. And when he was starting school, I was thinking that because if we had stayed in Oslo, he would have 2 hours of Sami language per week. So that's when I decided that, no, I have to go back home. And, here the children, they learn Sami at school, and you can even, high school is Sami language teaching, and universities, colleges, so you can, and also it's a living language here in Gaudiguay, one of the few places where the language is a majority language. And I was thinking that this is, it became more and more important to me to return to that and give him that confidence and give, to be able to speak, and also to have the close relationship to my parents and his grandparents. So that's when we packed our things, and I called my father and I said, we're coming home, you have to come and get us. And he said, yes, I will do that. So we have been living here since, and I'm really happy about that decision. And it's an important decision, and there are not that many options if you want to live in a society where the Sami language is a majority language. It's maybe one of the few places it's here. So I feel really lucky that I made that decision and came home, and all the great things we can do here. And so.
Kia ora, Ana Lajla, thank you. Just before we ask Joe to carry on, as a fact, what is the percentage of Sami who speak Sami?
Well, nobody really knows. There are some numbers, but there are no statistics, so nobody knows. But what we know is that so many of our people have lost the language, but also there is a revitalization happening in education, and people are, taking back the language also in, as grown-ups. So it's a positive development, in my opinion.
Kia ora, thank you. Joe Ehua, pass over to you, please, mate.
Kia ora, Ana Lajla, a tāhua ngā kōrero. Beautiful to hear about a part of your journey and some of the challenges that are facing your family and your community. Not too different from our community, actually, in my whānau. I come from an iwi. We're a humble iwi, Ngāti Whatua. And unfortunately, we were affected majorly by colonisation and all these other elements of the modern world, or Pākehā world, which have helped to diminish these capabilities of language and customs and traditions within our communities within Ngāti Whatua. So I was really lucky. I actually met a young lady 28 years ago who would become the catalyst, I suppose, for me really just re-entering the ao Māori in a way that had some direction. Because I knew that when I was hitting my mid-20s, I was a bit lost, actually. Back in the early 90s, late 80s, Tainui, koe tētahi o ngā hipi ngaro. Didn't really have a strong idea about who I was. My father had passed away a few years before that in 1986. And he was a huge influence in our family and in our community. But he passed away and left a major hole. And that affected myself and my siblings, and not only that, but the wider extended family. Whereas my future wife, who I met in 1993, she comes from an unbroken line of native speakers through her whānau Apanui and Te Aitanga Mahaki Whakapapa. And these are people who live on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. And so it was fortuitous that I met her. And, her communities that she introduced me to, these were Māori speaking communities, Waihirere, Manatū all these wonderful little hamlets of culture. Because the place that I was raised in is an urban environment. It's a Māori community, Ōrākei, in a sense of the affinity of families who live on the hill and in and around our marae, but we were hammered by colonisation. And so we had little or no language capacity once a certain group of people had passed away. And so there was a mission, I suppose, that my wife and I had, which was to create some capacity in ourselves so that we could be active participants in the revitalisation of our language within our own family, but within our own communities too. And so when we had children, and I'll just share a little photo here. When we had children, we very quickly decided that they needed to be in Māori medium education. And so this is my wife on the right there, and these are my children. And so we sent all of our kids to Māori medium schools, kohanga reo, early, childhood education, and also to whānau reo Māori at Manatū Care. And so that started to become the part of the ethos within our family, was to look at the environment, and certainly the education side is key. It was key, and it continues to be key. At the moment, my 8-year-old son, he's at Huani Waititi, which is one of the prominent kura kaupapa Māori primary school, Māori immersion schools in the country. So we're very lucky too that we've been able to move back to Auckland, to Tamaki Makaurau, and have our son in Huani Waititi. Kapahaka has been a big part of that learning journey too. My family and I being involved in Māori performing arts, and the kapahaka, that my wife belonged to. They're a well-known group in Aotearoa Waihirere Māori Club. And so within that kapahaka environment and the wider environment, you start to meet people. And these are people who become the movers and shakers of the language now, the Paraone Gloins, the Kingi Kirionas. And so you're rubbing shoulders with these people, you're being inspired by them, and also sharing in different learning environments with them. And so kapahaka was a major opportunity for our whānau to not only be a part of our community and to continue to maintain that legacy of songs and waiata and haka, but it was also a chance to be a part of a fraternity of Māori language advocates, and those of us who just love being a part of our culture. And so that was pretty much the kapahaka. And also, finally, in terms of the things that help create capacity, was our own working environment. So I've always been in a working environment where the Māori language was a part of the day-to-day discourse, whether I was working in, and I've been in education for over 25 years at all levels, from primary through to tertiary. And so being in these environments, and when my family and children come into those environments, e rongoa ana te reo, e rere ana te reo, the language is being heard, the language can be seen and felt in these environments. So we're very lucky, but I think for me, the third part that helped build some capacity and confidence to be, a participant in the revitalisation were the people, key people. And there were 3 key people that helped me and my family in our journey. And one was Taya Hawk, who back in about 1990, 1991, I ran into him on the street in town, I think. And he actually said to me, look, you need to come back to the marae. You need to come back and reintegrate yourself into the hapu, into the sub-tribe and our activities, because your father was a big part of that. And you need to come back and reinvigorate that whānau connection. And so Taya Hawk was one. The other was Materoa Hainga, Tai. I know you knew her well, our kuia from Ngāti Porou. And so Materoa Hainga, she was a huge advocate for me, a huge inspiration for me, where she pushed me to higher learnings within the language and on to eventually Te Panekiretanga. I probably wouldn't have gone to Te Panekiretanga, which is the elite school of Māori language, if it wasn't for Materua, to be honest. She was a big part of that journey. And finally, Te Kura Taya Hawk, kapea, my close whanaunga, my relation, who has been a big part of my life and the life of my family. And actually, he's been a huge part of the re-energizing of the language within our community. Tainui, I've just got a couple of minutes, if I could. I just want to run through now some of the initiatives that we're involved with our community and our iwi. And so one of the initiatives which has been a part of our redeveloping and rebuilding and trying to build our army of reo exponents and kaikōrero and whatnot has been Te Matakahi. And Te Matakahi is our elite academy of culture. And so Te Matakahi basically are hand-chosen fluent speakers from throughout Ngāti Whatua. And we bring them together 4 times a year. And it's principally about taking these fluent speakers from Ngāti Whatua, fluent to highly fluent, and giving them exposure to some of our sites of significance within Ngāti Whatua, actually getting them on the land, embedding the historical accounts, the pūrākau, the stories, and the whakapapa, the genealogies. And so here we are looking across our harbour, Kaipara, over to one of the sites where our waka Māhuhu Kitarangi landed at Tā Poropora, Manukapua. And so Te Matakahi has been a huge driver in creating a high quality group of people who have this understanding, a deeper understanding of some of our cultural narratives. So that there's Te Matakahi. And I'm one of the tutors at Te Matakahi, Te Kura Taya Hawk here. He's our head tutor, and I assist him in terms of helping our tauira along on their journey. We've got Tuia Te Hono and Whiria Te Hono. Tuia Te Hono is our Kaikōrero oratory workshop that we have once a month, every Wednesday, first Wednesday of the month we get together, and our women, they get together in Whiria Te Hono, and that there's the karanga group. And so we come together once a month. We have to. Unfortunately, we missed out on the osmosis and the natural passing on of that information and knowledge. And so we have to actively plan to be together. We have to plan to create learning environments that add value to the activities of our hapu in a day-to-day situation. So we have our Tuia Te Hono Kaikōrero and Whiria Te Hono karanga group. And again, it's just a forum to build that high-end capacity within the hapu. We also have kurapō, and kurapō is every Tuesday night. We have, and this is our own marae at Ōrākei. We have 4 classes, 4 levels of language, from the beginner, emerger, up to the fluent, and we get together every Tuesday night. And we have about 100 tauira descend upon our marae. I take the fluent group, and I've got around 15 students who actively take part in classes. To be honest, the COVID shutdown hasn't hindered us at all. In fact, it's been great to use this online technology, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there for our iwi take Indigenous people. And finally, I'll just finish up here and I'll pass it on. We've been building our kapahaka ranks throughout the iwi with one major focus, which is our own tribal ahure, our own tribal festival of language and culture. And so that there's been a major undertaking in the last 12 months for my wife and I, and the other groupings of kayako, of teachers and whatnot, of tutors. But it's been worth it because we've seen this whole new growth and confidence within Ngāti Whatua, not just in Ōrākei, but through the whole of the iwi. Just finally, in terms of responding to this whole COVID environment, we have been actively utilising the online platform, and every day, Monday to Friday, we've got a thing called Toi Ahure, which is really a kapahaka formatted type of an hour of power, we call it. That just keeps that learning going, but more so, it's about keeping our people connected and in touch, particularly our older kuia and korauwa who just need to hear the voices. They need to hear a little bit of the banter online, just to know that they're not on their own, they're still a part of a collective. So it's just a part of my journey, our journey as a whānau, and certainly it's put me and my wife in a better position to be active participants and advocates, and and if we're influencers, great. If we're able to inspire people, fantastic. But the learning never stops. We continue to learn ourselves, my wife and I. Every now and then we find a new ki waha or a little expression or a proverb, and we have a talk about it and how it might be applied. But generally, we kōrero at home. That's the main thing. We kōrero at home within our kāinga, with our boy, with our children. They're all fluent. So we have times, kua kōrero Māori, ana he mātou. E tahiwa, kua huri ki te reo Māori, ki te reo Pākehā. So we switch in and out depending on the environment, depending on the context, and also who's around us. But we love our language. It's hard to imagine being a part of a community, a Māori community that doesn't have the reo as a prominent part of its everyday culture and identity. So I wish us all luck in our journeys and with our mission with our people, because it is a key part of who we are. E tai koe matura ngā pahu o tēnei, ngā mihi nui.
Tēnā koe hoa, he rawe e rā kōrero. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that part of your journey where you started looking for yourself and through love have developed a lot of capacity. E mihi ana ki a koe. Zoe e hoa, I know that some of that has resonated with you. We'd love to hear a little bit of your story.
For sure. Guys, it's so musical to hear your accents and hear your language. It's really, really, really lovely, especially in these COVID times. Joe, like you say, it's difficult to, it's easy to feel like you're alone in the world, when you're just so much is missing from community. So it's so nice to see you and hear you, and hear about language. So I grew up in the city. I grew up in the capital of Canada, in Ottawa, for the most part, which is kind of a funny place to grow up as a brown person, as an Indigenous person, in the capital of colonization of this country. And I didn't really know that about that place until I left it, because I was young, and I left when I was finished high school. And we were not language speakers in my family at that time. Colonization did a number on our family. Residential school did a number on our family. Indian day school also. My mom is a survivor of Indian day school. My dad's dad is a residential school survivor. So it's been on my mom's side. My mom is Heiltsuk, so I'm Heiltsuk on my mom's side, which is on the west coast of Canada. And her mother spoke her language, but my mom had to leave home as a girl to go to school, so she doesn't speak her language. And I actually hardly know any Heiltsuk. I've faced a really sad moment one day when I was a teenager and I was visiting the school there, and in Bella Bella, which is where I was born, where my mom lives now and where my mom's people live. And I was there visiting with my mom, and we went to the school, and there was an event going on, and I had to go to the bathroom. And I went to where the bathrooms were, and the names of girls and boys were written on the doors in Heiltsuk, and I didn't know which door was mine. And I felt really sad about that. And I guessed, and I was wrong. I was like, oh gosh, not only am I wrong and I'm in the boys' bathroom, but I didn't know my language, and I felt really sad about that, and embarrassed and ashamed. And that shame it doesn't belong to us. That's just that made me sad also, recognizing that this shame doesn't belong to me. And on my dad's side of the family, my grandfather went to residential school as a young boy. And he lost his language and became a lifelong, staunch believer in education, in white man's education. And he never learned the language. He never learned the Mohawk language, but he was very well educated. He became a lawyer and a judge, and education is pretty big on that side of my family. My dad's an Ivy League graduate, my auntie's a PhD. It's kind of a big deal, and so I have a degree in film, and so that was sort of instilled. You read, you go to school, you get a degree. But and so growing up, I learned words here and there in Mohawk, but I like to joke, and it's actually probably not even far from the truth, but I probably knew about 12 words in Mohawk growing up, and 10 of them were the numbers 1 to 10. And the other 2 were hello and goodbye, and that was it. I couldn't say my name in the language. I didn't know how to say my name. But I remember going to a night class with my dad and trying to learn, and I had little stickers on things around the house labeling objects. But that's not how you learn a language, learning a list of nouns and labeling the things that we see in the world. That's not a relationship to a language. It doesn't teach you anything, to learn how to say, cup and table and desk and chair and apple, and you don't learn a language this way. And unfortunately, that's for the most part how our languages are taught in schools and in Indigenous language programs. It's really, really ineffective. But for the most part across the board, that's what people have access to. And, so we grew into adults, both my dad and I, as not speakers of the language, because that is the kind of language program that we had access to. And so those programs do not make you language speakers. My dad even spent a good chunk of time going to an immersion program, but that program was a bunch of lists of nouns and verbs, and you can't learn to think in the language in that way. So he made it his work to figure out how to learn the language and how to teach the language. And he met a fellow, David Miracle, who's from one of the other Mohawk communities nearby, and saw the work that he was working on. And David Miracle is also a linguist, and so he did this wonderful groundwork that became ever changing for our language. He learned how to piece apart our language and figure out what the jigsaw puzzles were, what the pieces were, so that we could learn how to put it back together. And as a second language speaker, that is key, to learn how to think, how to piece things together, and, I learned French quite successfully because you sit there and learn how to conjugate verbs. We were punished for speaking English in class, so we would have to stay after school and conjugate verbs. Je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, but in our Indigenous languages, we don't learn that kind of thing, how to conjugate, how to, say, I like you, I used to like you, I don't like you anymore, I will like you, these things that you learn to manipulate. And so that was really, really key. So my dad saw these little pieces that his friend David was putting together and said, this will make me a speaker. And so he took that, and he basically was like the Steve Jobs of our language, and took those little pieces, and he made the Apple computer of our language. And so now it's 22 years now of the operation of the Ungumwana Gonjokwa. It's the Mohawk Immersion Language School here in Six Nations, where we give people the Apple computer of our language in their brain. So it's a 2-year full-time study program, and I'm a graduate, and become a graduate now, a Mohawk language speaker. And after I graduated, I became a Mohawk language teacher, and I did that online for 8 years or 9 years. And I just recently gave my position to a successor who will take my work and hopefully grow it into a whole new thing or a bigger thing or whatever, because I'm now focusing on making films, and hopefully that my work in language will meld with my work on the screen. And they did meld online. I was sort of like, when the pandemic began, because I had always been teaching online, I was like, welcome to my world, everybody. I had been doing it for a number of years, teaching in this vacuum, where I didn't ever get to meet any of my students or see them in real life, or actually see them in real time, because our students were spread out so far. It was meant to be asynchronous learning so that they could learn on their own, which is so difficult for a student. But it also meant that I didn't know a lot of the time, how effective it is. But I get communications, it was sort of once in a while I'd get a message in a bottle from a student, and be like, oh, they're learning. And it was really, really beautiful to hear and to see. Sometimes somebody would send me a recording or a video of some things they'd written or spoken. It was so beautiful to see, it's working. This thing has potential. I don't probably have enough lifetimes in me, because I do a lot of things to like run that course to the end of what I dreamt of it, and for it. But hopefully somebody else who's like only has one job can take that on, and that's what the language deserves. When you asked about what I see as my responsibility or like my life purpose or whatever, I see myself as having, many sacred responsibilities, and that, living and teaching and breathing in my language is one of those things. And I do my best. I'm not like a superior level speaker, but I'm a good enough speaker. I could have this conversation in Mohawk right now, and sound as I do now in English. But I think I'll probably never speak English as well as somebody like Barack Obama. He's like a superior level English speaker. I think many of us could aspire to be as eloquent. But I don't imagine that I have enough life in me, because I have so many passions and I think purposes. I feel like some of my purpose is to be a really good mom, and I'm an excellent mother, and I feel like it's my sacred responsibility to be that. And I've brought my boy to Aotearoa twice now, because that was part of that part of our life, to show him the world and show him other Indigenous people, and show him that, he can dream big and travel the oceans and meet you. And he has a place in the world now where he knows that like he could travel across the pond, and he knows people there. And I think that's done wonders for him, and he's joined the Indigenous Student Council at his high school. He's in grade 10 now, Tainui. And it was the first ever Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada the other day. And to recognize that, people wear orange shirts to talk about residential school and the impact of that on our people. And he led a walk around the school with other Indigenous children in this school. And I just was so proud of him, so I really feel like, okay, I'm living that, one of my responsibilities. And he is going to be a second language speaker also. That's one of my dreams for him, and I'm trying to hope to inspire him to be a second language speaker. He's not there yet. I started learning the language when he was already 6 years old, and I sort of missed the boat on that really early age where you form a relationship with your child in a language, and at that time it was in English. So by the time I became an advanced enough speaker, he was 8 years old. And so kind of missed that boat. And I taught him, as best as I could, but, we speak English at home. And I'm a little bit sad about that. But when I do make time and make an effort to speak to him in Mohawk, he understands and he'll answer me in English. Or if he doesn't understand, he'll ask me and he'll repeat. And he's interested and passionate about our people and our language and has an awareness that I didn't have at his age. So I have hope that he'll pick up the language and learn it earlier than I did. And I learned it earlier than my dad did. So I don't know, maybe this generation will be the one to produce a first language speaker. And because of our school, that my dad created, we are creating first language speakers. Babies are growing up in Mohawk in this community for the first time in generations. And it's been a long time coming. When my dad first started the school, he speaks about how there were a couple dozen first language speakers left in this community and like maybe one second language speaker. And now there are the same number of speakers, but because time has passed, we've lost most of those first language speakers, but we've retained our overall number of speakers because all of these new second language speakers have taken up the language, which means we have eradicated language loss in this community, which is incredible. That's incredible. So I'm so proud of my dad, for his life's work. And I don't think that I can be as single-minded and dedicated to that purpose, because I really believe that it's important to place our people in the media so that we're visible, because we have been absent from the story and from the history, and that has done a number on all of us and all of our languages. So I really am working hard to increase our visibility, so that we can be present and so our languages can be heard on the screen and have their place that they deserve.
And I think it's that thing about being visible, which is what Lajla talked about, what turned her on about the existence of Indigenous people and being a part of that. Thank you, Zoe. Your dad's story is just so amazing. It really is. While we're talking with you, I wanted to ask a question of you that's come in from a whanaunga of ours, a Raumata Baker. As a person who discovered language later in life, how did that change your life? In what way did knowing your own language change your life, Zoe?
There were many eye-opening things that I learned along the way in terms of just like learning a new word and the meaning and the etymology of a word, things that don't translate, in either language, things that we take for truth in English, just like the concept doesn't exist in Mohawk, and the best example that I think English speakers can grasp for that is the concept of the word nothing or the word empty. We don't have a single word to express these things in our language because our language is inherently positive. So we say, instead of nothing, we say not something, and if you really think about what that means or how that can apply to one's original way of thinking prior to colonization, saying, if you ask somebody, oh, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. Versus like, oh, what are you doing? Not something. It's just a different meaning. Negating a positive thing is not the same as a negative thing. So, and when you say, is the glass half full or is it half empty? And the English mind tends to think that we live in this dichotomy, in this two ways of thinking. You're either this person or you're that person. You're a positive person or you're a pessimistic person. But if you can't say the word empty, if you have to say that there's not something in it, that's how we express that the glass is empty. We say there's not something in it. That's just a different concept entirely. You cannot create the dichotomy of being a not something in it person versus a something in it person. It just doesn't work. So I had a mind-blowing moment when I understood that, like, empty is not something in it. That means we can't, I was just like mind blown. We can't say that. And then other little things like how important it is to express that you have peace. When you're saying you're doing well, you're saying you have peace. You're at peace. And just the most beautiful concepts that we can express in the English language about spreading peace, and like those are just things that we live by every day in the language. When we open and close a ceremony or a class or a meeting or a discussion like this one, we would have the Thanksgiving address, where we would thank all of creation, and then we do it again at the end. So if you went around in life like thanking all of creation before you began anything and then before you ended it, what would our lives be like? What would our world be like if we were inherently grateful all the time? I think it just blew my mind, things that sort of new age culture gravitates towards, like these are, about gratitude, and blessed. You see these things and like, these are not, we had these guests over visiting from a church and they're like, wow, you're speaking of such Christian values. And I'm like, these are not Christian values. These are just values about being a good citizen on the planet, and being a good human and being with your spirit and the spirit of the land and the things around you and the people around you. I think that really just opened my eyes to what it means to be that yes, it is true that when you learn your language, if you have the privilege to do so and the access to do so, that it does change your mind, and that you do have a new, deeper understanding of what it means to be an Indigenous person, because you're more in touch with your original way of thinking. And I think we can still be strong Indigenous people without having the gift of our languages. But like, there are just little glimpses at things that you get being inside the language that you wouldn't understand.
Kia ora, thank you, Zoe. One of the challenges that we all face, notwithstanding our love for our children, is when they get to become teenagers, there's a new range of pressures come upon them. I'm just thinking about your boy Nilas, and Lajla. Is his head out of his device yet? I mean, what are the special challenges getting our teenagers on board? I hear what you're saying about Julian, Zoe, because I think it was the same with my girl. But with those lullabies I sang to her, it planted something in her. And so I think if they have that interest and the passion, when they come back to it, they realize it's already inside them. It makes it easy to come out. But when they become teenagers, Lajla, what do you think are the challenges facing our Indigenous teenagers to preserve their language and culture?
Well, if I first take it from a personal perspective, since you're mentioning Nilas, who is 15 years old and very into gaming, but I think for them particularly, because we have been so lucky to grow up here in Gaudigate, in the heart of the language, and they have learned it from me and the family growing up. So it's the language is they are very confident with their language, and I think for them it's more about, for example, Nilas, he has very good relationship with my father. They go out and they are cutting wood for the winter, and doing this, carrying stuff from one storage to another, and and that's where the interesting learning happens. And it was really nice one this summer when they came back, and he was like, you know, asking about this and that word, what did it mean again, and you know, all the, because our language is so connected to nature. For example, we have over 1,000 words that describe reindeer, different reindeer and colors and antlers, you know, all the varieties of reindeer. And then we have over 300 words that describe snow and the conditions of snow, because it's so important for example, for reindeer herders, you have to be experts and you have to be able to communicate to the other, you know, reindeer herders, where how is the grazing conditions there and how is the snow. And so that's of course a challenge now, as you are asking about teenagers, Tainui, because our teenagers are also children or youth of the modern time, and they are gaming and watching Netflix, and you know, it's so, those windows are so empty, with there is almost nothing in our languages where they can, you know, that is cool and that is something where everyone is hanging out. And you know, it's and one teacher actually told me that many of the young people now in school, you know, the youth, they have registered that they are speaking English to each other. And that's a very interesting development, that, you know, because English is cool and that's what everyone is using online. And so it's another level of challenge. So it is, yeah, it is a struggle, but that's where our work is really, really important, that we like Zoe also says, that it's about making our people visible, but also our languages heard in those windows there where the young people are, and be able to give them something that they can relate to, and that there are stories they can recognize themselves in, then that are cool. And so I'm really happy we are now here we are collaborating with the, you know, the national broadcaster here in Norway, and we are making drama series for young people, and NRK is investing a lot of financing in that. And now we have 3 big productions that are, you know, you know, going into production soon, hopefully. So I think that's really important to yeah.
Well, it was just really carrying on that notion of being visible. And so if our young people see themselves reflected in the stories that they are experiencing, a next step on is that pride. And with respect to you, Joe, I mean, it's amazing the amount of commitment that your community has put to meet on various nights and to do this and do that. What are the challenges, though, of access? Because I think the statistics say something like, was it only 1 in 5 Māori have access to Māori language education? What are the challenges getting our people interested? Wai mauri ke tō whānau, your fellows have got something happening, but what advice do we have for those who don't have access to those kinds of resources or commitments, or individuals?
Yeah, that's a hard question, Tainui, because I think within each and every one of us there's a level of passion and commitment that creates those windows of opportunity. Certainly within Ngāti Whatua, we realised from the get-go, i etahi wā me hari te maunga ki te tangata kia pātata tonu te maunga ki tērā hāpori. Sometimes you've got to take that mountain to the people, and then where's the connection? What is a connection that invigorates a desire to learn the language? It was interesting, actually, the question that was posed just before, in terms of language, no language, does it make me less Māori or more Māori having language, as opposed to those who don't have language? And for me, it's as simple as the analogy of the woodcutter that goes into the forest to chop down a tree. And that there is the wood chopper who will simply undertake the mission in front of them to fell the tree. And then on the other hand, there's the wood chopper who has this immutable and indivisible connection to the taiao and to nature, and undertakes these different expressions of that connection to the taiao, to nature, that invigorates this ecology of nature, of person, of inner self. And so you're talking about this whole coming together, wood chopping, or or simply being within your community. There's a layer of understanding, there's a layer of connectivity, there's a layer of access to that ecology, the spiritual, the physical, the social. And so it's trying to unbundle some of those opportunities for our whānau and saying, hey, we understand you are Māori, I am Māori, clear cut. There is no distinction there. However, did you know there are layers of absolute brilliant color and tone and feel that you can get to, that you can lay your hands onto, that your spirit can bathe in, if you take a journey, if you commit to, this type of journey, that really language is language. And let's say one thing. One of the issues that the Māori language has at the moment is that it has become a language of tradition and not a language of transaction. And unfortunately, that's where the English language has that benefit advantage, and it's got that pull because it's become a language of transaction globally. And I'm not talking about just money transaction or commercial transaction, but it becomes the currency of ideas as well, that we quickly default to. And yet, how do we pull that around and create the language of transaction where it's funky, where it's sexy, where it's got an element that draws our children in? And I know exactly what you're talking about. My boy, he is in front of his bloody iPad night and day, and it is just an ongoing stream of just spiritless dribble coming out. And I just say to him, hey, ka tira tō whakarongo ki nā kupu, wairua kore nei. Stop listening to that dribble. And again, it's just creating opportunities where our language isn't only a language of tradition, unfortunately, but it becomes also a language of transaction. I want to go down to my shop, the corner dairy, and buy a loaf of bread. I roto I te reo. I want to use my language on a day-to-day basis that not only completes a transaction of that level of commerce, but also a transaction of discourse and ideas. And that's where I see there being a huge opportunity for all of our Indigenous languages, is to make that crossover into our broader community, where Orake, where I live, there are 5% Māori, 90% Pākehā, but it is the centre of my life world. So how do I now transform my life world to enable my language to flourish, to enable my culture to flourish? And we're starting to undertake that now in small steps. But again, I think it's just finding those opportunities in terms of language of culture, language of transaction, and making that crossover, creating opportunities within our hubs, within our communities. Mine is in a Māori speaking community, but within our hub of Ngāti Whatua, kei te ora te reo, kei te rere te reo.
Ka pai, thank you, Joe. Before I ask Zoe to finish our session with a prayer or some words that you feel appropriate, Zoe, I just want to say as I listen to you speak, some key themes come through. One of them is returning home, wherever that home happens to be, because that is where the land is, that is where the waters are, that is where the vibrations of our Mother Earth and Father Sky are. And that we undergo a journey. We undergo a journey with the ones who we love. And Joe, it's lovely to hear that was through love that you got access into yourself, as well as traveling with the people who we respect, people like your dad, Zoe. There are so many wonderful role models and people worthy of respect in this journey. And I think for me, one of the beautiful things I've discovered in my own journey is just the caliber and the love of these people that we all respect. The intellectual rigor, the spiritual security, and I guess that positivity, Zoe, just that reflecting a different view of the world and all its potential. And while we live in a moment where fear and anger seem to be the currency of transaction, I think that what we all learn on our journeys will make the world a better place. And I have no doubt we got to this point, we will go further. We will explore the language of transaction, as you put it so appropriately, Joe. We will explore ways for our young people to be turned on by who they are, and we will continue just to be. That's just, we're going to be a circuit breaker. We're going to be a circuit breaker for all the ills of the world, and it's our languages that help us think in that way and articulate what needs to be said, because the world is ready to listen. And on that note, e mihi nui atu ana ki a koe taku tuakana, e Joe kia kourua, waku tuahine. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and for sharing those precious thoughts. That's what Native Minds is about, is just offering what's on a Native mind to our world. Tēnā koe, Zoe, we'd be so grateful if you finish our session, please, e hoa.
I'll say words of thanksgiving in the Mohawk language that give thanks to the people and Mother Earth and to the Creator and all of creation. So before we leave, I'll do that. I gari wana dakwa ne ohana gari wadakwa ne gunhura dunsara, garo jiniore aguego duatandi, ne oriwa aguego oknahoda oya, imbariwayon, that's no oknahoda oya, nanda wayari, nene yori hawana. De yatino guardado, ne unguesua, that's no ayawa si aguego scana, ankahake, jihuanzade. De yatino guardado, ne yatisota garakwa, that no asunta naka garakwa, that no achira wachia garakwa, that no yatinistaha unhuanja. That no aguego ye hawe ye dage, that no onanua. Do agunsa yerte jit caronhiade negade ovado da chida wanu horado nesumbuetiso da no aguego rotkawa jihuanzade eto nigawanege da no ona eto.
Tēnā koe hoa, tēnā koe Joe, tēnā koe ana Lajla. Thank you so much, everybody. Kia ora, guys.
Thank you.
Te tonu wā.